And we're back from commercial. So Doug had a good question for Bill about his first book about moment arm exercise, which is what was the sticking point for so many people reading the book? Was it physics? Was it physiology?
Well, you know, first it wasn't, so I'm not a professional writer. So this wasn't an assignment. I didn't have a market in mind. I had injured myself. And this was me working out over really a 4-year stretch, me working out what happened and discovering what I refer to as a disconnect between exercise and biomechanics. And so basically I rebuilt my own process of working out. And then I realized from all my notes and sketches and diagrams, wait a minute, I have something here. But I didn't know what it was. Yeah. I didn't know if it was a commercial book. I didn't know if it was an academic book. So I just put it together and had it spiral bound because I didn't know any, you know.
I remember getting that book.
Yeah.
And of all the ones you've written, that's my favorite one.
Well,
because when it came to me, it like has this little note scrawled on it. It's like, big iron, blah, blah, blah. And like, please read this. Tell me what you think. And I like read it. I was like, holy shit. Well, it was so cool because you were living through your thought process. Right. You were thinking on paper. And I was like, my God, why am I so damn stupid? I never thought of anything, you know?
Well. But
Mr. Body by Science.
Yeah, Mr. Emergency Medicine.
That's right.
But I was working my own things out. Had these notes here, but guys around my age who had also studied the Menser and the Nautilus literature from the 70s, every one of us got it right away.
Yeah.
Read it and said, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. When you get to our age, the crows start to come home to roost. Shit you did in 1975
right.
all of a sudden becomes a problem in 2005.
And when you're my age, stuff you did this morning will haunt you later tonight. You don't have to wait 20 years.
Yeah, man, I just got that wooden roller coaster at Busch Gardens, and I'm like, man, I don't feel all that. Yeah.
But the and what now was also is, you know, if also everybody our age with our reading experience read this and said, boy, you really kind of, you know, poked holes in a lot of Nautilus theory. You didn't come out and say it, but it's in between the lines.
Yeah.
But now, and unfortunately for me, Ellington Darden got in touch with me when he read it. Said, "Boy, I really liked it," which I was sweating it out because I knew what I knew where my head was at when I was writing it, but I didn't want to write it that way.
Right.
And he said, "I especially like the first 5 chapters when you talk about the science." Well, the first 5 chapters is where I say, "Here's what we used to think,"
right?
And it was pretty much a direct quote
Here's
from
the
his
old
books.
Nautilus dogma.
Right.
I didn't say that, but that's what I led it right up
Yeah.
to. So I must have phrased it right because I'm really not doing this to make enemies.
Right.
You know, like I said, that was strictly working my own thing out. But anyone
it was a brave book too, because in that time, I mean, the whole super slow thing was at it's a pretty high peak of religiosity at the time. It was like
probably right.
It's like, you know, guys, I blew out a bicep tendon doing a super slow curl.
Yeah.
You know,
and again, I didn't want to. Just in general, I don't want to critique other people's work.
Right, but
that is what I was
for
doing.
the first time ever, it said, you know, just going slow isn't going to fix everything if the biomechanics aren't right.
I tried not to say that exactly that way, but sure, that's it. Like I said,
if anything, going too slow with the incorrect biomechanics like drags out the whole process. It might make it more likely, you know.
So I found though that, for instance, like the NSCA crowd dismissed it. They had no interest in it.
Why is that? Why do they?
Because they didn't have the frame of reference of the Nautilus and the HIT background. Yeah. And they weren't interested.
I'm sure they got bored really quick and just.
But they weren't interested in objectively saying, well, here's what biomechanics says how the shoulder works, so we shouldn't. You know, one thing about the HIT influenced community is, right or wrong, whether I agree with them individually or not, or butted heads with them individually or not, they do care about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
They do, but
they really do.
To a fault, but they do care.
Yeah.
You try to engage NSCA people or ACE people, whatever. They're interested in. A lot of them are interested in the trappings of working out, But picking apart, gee, do you really think you should be putting your shoulder in that position? That's not.
Yeah.
It's just not on their agenda.
Yeah, it's like I made this point. This is a total aside, but one of the speakers at or it's not a total aside. I'll bring it around. Dave Asprey, who's spoken at the 21 convention, he had a conference a couple weeks ago, the biohackers conference, and I was trying to explain what a biohacker was, and I finally came up with this pretty little Venn diagram of the quantified self folks up here who won't get out of bed in the morning unless they can track something. Right, like I need to know how many steps I'm going to take, how many bowel movements I'm going to have, and they're going to put it into a black box and turn it into some sort of like metric of how healthy they are, or if they're moving in the right direction, or if they're thinking well. And then there's a whole component that we'll get you to speak on like the notion of, well, number one, any human involved kind of measure is inherently lossy and fuzzy, and 2 seconds here, 2 seconds there. It's like doing labs of blood. If you let something oxidize just a little longer, it's going to give you a totally different readout. And then there's the life extensionist people who are waiting for the singularity when humans and machines come together in one. And they're the least healthy people on planet Earth because they're waiting for capital S science to make capital M magic and let them live for eternity. And then you got the health and fitness folks filling out the final third, which is like the NSCA type people are like, we like working out. And well, are you measuring anything? No, we just like working out. Like it's for its own sake, they enjoy it. And so you get some people, and the hit would almost be like if you took the quantified self sphere to some degree and overlaid it with the health and fitness folks. So they care about components of actionable data or certain truths. Like your shoulder will, you're going to impinge right here. Unless you've had your AC joint sawed off for some reason, you're going to impinge here. And so it's kind of funny that way, though, that there are a number of people who they're so wrapped up in the qualitative feel of training that they care nothing for the kind of nuts and bolts of it.
Well, feel is a very persuasive phenomenon. And I'm going to bring this up tomorrow. I'll get people say, "Oh, I did a kettlebell class. It's a great workout, right?" Why?
Yeah.
Why is it a great workout? Well, you breathe heavy, you're sweating, your muscles hurt the next day. All right, I get it. That is very persuasive. Your muscles burn, you're sore. Yeah, that's
come over and wax my car.
Yeah, but exactly. And there's this huge disconnect between the feel
Right.
and what it means, or what's really happening there.
Right.
And whether it's kettlebell classes or
Wide grip chins. Just feeling the tip of your scapula dig into your latissimus and thinking,
Yeah.
oh, that's
Yeah,
for
yeah,
width.
right, exactly.
that
It's
kind of
very
notion.
feel in an exercise is very.
It is compelling.
In fact, your bulldog with a bone question about J reps 10 years or so ago.
Yeah.
What was that?
Oh no! Here. I can remember it clear as day because it goes like this. Because Bill's talking about like biomechanics, this and that, and you're interviewing him, and he's telling this really long, kind of compelling piece about this, that, and you're like, that's really, really great. What do you think about J reps? Like, and then it kind of, because that was the hot thing. Like Johnson had just released the J reps volume 1 of 3 something. I forget how many volumes deep he went. Actually, there is some. So that was funny because totally tangentially, there is a small amount of literature more recently that indicates like when tissues contract, it's not like everything on that linear path starts sliding towards one another. It's almost this portion and then this portion. Not that you can affect the hypertrophy as much as there's this almost regional, boxcar effect to the sarcomeres. Like there's a little bit here, there's a little bit here, there's a little bit here. They're all under tension, but it's sort of like collapse, collapse, collapse.
But I think it's a bit of a reach at this point to say, so then that justifies breaking the rep up.
Oh, totally. No, I'm on board with you there.
Now,
I just think it's interesting.
Having said that, though, J reps 21, like what was Darden's 21?
Stage, you call them stage reps at one point.
Stage reps, right? And
Rep
old
and a half,
old bodybuilding magazines, 21s or reps and a half. Whatever the mechanism is, it's very compelling.
Sure.
Like, because let's face it, you go stale if you use the same technique.
Sure.
And so you go stale and you can get 8 reps and you can't get 9.
No.
And then instead the next time you do 1.5 reps with that and whoa.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoa.
That's right.
I got that depleted feeling again.
That's
I'm
right.
pumped. Holy cow.
That's right.
So I, not to be anti-science, but it doesn't matter.
That's right. It's like it's an interesting component.
The feel is very compelling, and stepping back a second, if it keeps you motivated to train, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Sure.
It doesn't. Being a trainer, not an academic, I don't have to justify everything I do with a direct link to a research.
Right.
I mean, I have a framework I work around, but if it keeps a person interested, great, and doesn't hurt, of course.
It's a bit like what Ryan Hall, who's a friend of ours who has a facility in New Orleans, an exercise physiologist, says when people, how long do I have to do this till you die? Like, so if you're going to go stale. You're not going to stay on the same routine forever. And so picking kind of best, even if benign, like even if it's all up here and the change is just for the head, so what?
Doug, you talk about why didn't you think about it? Actually, in your bulletin one, you had one line in there about whether you actually, I think it was about whether you actually needed a cam.
Yeah.
And the line you said was, when you're doing a bench press, if your pectorals are can display less torque as your arms coming together, then doesn't a compound exercise by definition
Have the cam built in, yeah.
Yes. And I took that, kind of ran with it. I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
that was one of the things I went when I blew my biceps and triceps out. I went back to the NCAA biomechanics, and I went back to that line. I reread. I said, there's something there.
That whole book was, by and large, an embarrassment, because there's that stage of training where you're kind of trying something new, and it's like you're watching the tide come in. You measure, and then you measure, and you're like, oh my God, the whole city's going to be underwater in a week. And then you go write a book about it,
Yeah. But I mean, that was the first bit of your work I had read, because Coach comes in. So Coach John Coleman was my mentor. He won 3 national championships in American football in Mexico City, of all places. A very, very interesting guy. And I think he was an assistant coach under Bear Bryant during the Texas A&M days. And he goes, do you know Doug McGuff? I go, no. He goes, here's his book, read it. All right. All right. So I'm reading the book, and the thing is that there was a sense of excitement, but there was also a sense of, the further you got in the book, it was clear that you were recognizing that this was a tide coming in scenario. There was a tonal change in the middle of the book that went from, like when you're talking about doing a leg press with a broken foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how you could figure out kind of the perfect rep speed based on the fact that you went too fast or too slow, pain increased. But about 5 or 6 seconds, you could kind of suss out that middle ground, which to me is like cracking the armor. It's like starting to see some
that
of
was
that
my
stuff.
first experiment with excommunication, too.
Yeah.
Well, back in those days, it was like 10-10, and it was like, and I'm like, I'm really not seeing any clients that can put forth a good effort and go any slower than 7 seconds. Right. I just did not seeing it. And then I'm like, all of a sudden I broke my foot racing my bike. I'm like, well, let's find out where force really does become an issue. And it was a lot faster than what was being advertised at the time. And you're kind of like, oh, man.
Right.
This doesn't fit the paradigm. It just popped in my head. I got to tell you that moment arm exercise and your discussion of scapulohumeral timing changed how I reduce shoulder dislocations.
Oh, wow.
And because...
You're talking about in the ER.
Yeah. Your shoulder gets dislocated, the humeral head comes out of the glenoid, generally falls forward, anterior. And the popular techniques for doing that are incongruent and use a lot of mechanical force to do it. And if you can get the person comfortable, and you can get them to relax all the muscle spasm, and you just put them in appropriate scapulohumeral timing, because a shoulder dislocation, it's busy. You saw the video, and it's like, oh my God, it's just batshit in here. And a patient comes in and is like, oh, my shoulder's out, and it's this big muscular guy, and you're like, oh crap. You got to start an IV, you got to get a monitor, you're going to have to do conscious sedation, you're going to have to knock them out and then put it back in. But I'm now about 22 shoulder dislocations under my belt with no sedation, no analgesia, no nothing. Just sit and relax, and then just get it in the right scapulohumeral timing, and it slips right through the buttonhole.
So are you kind of putting them and gradually externally rotating them into the scapular plane and just letting it kind of fall back on its own?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Interesting. It works. And there's actually a guy that has created a guy in Australia that's created a whole website, shoulderdislocation.net. A guy named Cunningham, and it's called the Cunningham technique now, but it's really the DeSimone
DeSimone technique.
DeSimone technique. I'm like, dang,
We're going to be back from commercial with more exciting news about the DeSimone technique. Dr. Doug McGuff, who had a great talk today. To my left, Bill DeSimone, who's been training people about as long as I've been alive. Yeah, as long as I've been, yeah, based on talks yesterday. So what we're going to do is kind of as a point of interest, 10 years ago, roughly, what was the sticking point for so many people reading the book? Was it physics? Was it physiology?
Well, you know, first it wasn't, so I'm not a professional writer. So this wasn't an assignment. I didn't have a market in mind. I had injured myself. And this was me working out over really a 4-year stretch, me working out what happened and discovering what I refer to as a disconnect between exercise and biomechanics. And so basically I rebuilt my own process of working out. And then I realized from all my notes and sketches and diagrams, wait a minute, I have something here. But I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was a commercial book. I didn't know if it was an academic book. So I just put it together and had it spiral bound because I didn't know any, you know.
I remember getting that book.
Yeah.
And of all the ones you've written, that's my favorite one.
Well,
because when it came to me, it like has this little note scrawled on it. It's like big iron, blah, blah, blah. And like, please read this. Tell me what you think. And I like read it. I was like, holy shit. It
Well,
was so cool because you were living through your thought process.
Right.
You were thinking on paper. And I was like,
one exercise.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I have a lot of stuff in the studio I have to do one.
These things. Why do you think all of a sudden hard work is in vogue? I mean, this is kind of brain sort of picking out loud. Why all of a sudden in the turn of the 1800s with health food, and then I'm forgetting the name of some of the guys in the late 1800s with these like full-on, you're gonna be barefoot, you're gonna be naked, you're gonna be training.
Bernard McFadden.
Yeah, about
Right,
Bernard
yeah,
McFadden.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. The lion. And